Okay, a quick tutorial on these steps because a lot of people liked them and said they'd even want to come help in order to learn. And it's like, it's one thing when you do it, you have to have that concentration, and it's like doing a puzzle, but then when someone's watching you, it's actually an extra layer, and it doesn't help because I'm kind of new to every project I do, so therefore teaching actually takes more time. So basically, I took this tile down a bit. I didn't think it would look strange because when you look at other tile jobs on stairs, they usually have a top piece here. So when you look all the way up, it actually looked fine. The reason why I really dropped this is because the stairs were already finished in a smooth texture, and when people step on it, you needed to bring it down because if they step on the tile, it can pop with that much weight. So I lowered it in order to keep these from popping. I did these in blue. I didn't want it to look too busy, so I did the blue tile there as well. This looks a little bit rough because of course it hasn't been grouted. I'm using gray, thin set is what they call it, in order to, if any pops through, like this one here might be like popping through a bit if you use too much cement. If it's a different color than your grout, sometimes you could see those or you got to chip them out. It's kind of more of a mess. When I applied them, I would get this little spacer here, so it kind of made everything evenly. See how I move it as I went, and a little bit of cement there. I would hammer about 3 of these pieces at one time. These are my leftovers. I would hammer them upside down so I didn't scratch the blue. I would do 3, approximately 1 boom, so I'd have big pieces as well as medium-sized pieces as well as even tinier pieces. And then you just fit it like a puzzle. Like when you do a puzzle, it's easier to start with the outline first, especially this one corner. However, every now and then, I would just get a regular piece that would just fit. This one's a little crooked. But see, some of these aren't edges, but it always makes it easier to do that. The one thing you want to do is not have a repetitive motion. So therefore, this corner here has got smaller sides. This one here, I made sure it wasn't similar to this because you want it to look random. When you place them, let's see, I would always start with the cement here because this was actually the hardest side because it's stuck in the corner. Over here, you can kind of play with a little bit. It is a little awkward doing stairs because you're kind of twisted when you've got a wall here. It kind of makes it awkward. But again, if you start in this corner, it does make it easier. You also want to do less right in the edges on the step when you apply the grout. What's super important, absolutely, is that when you do each piece and you figure out which one you're going to apply, you have to do what they call sandwiching or let's say, what was the name? Oh, buttering. You want to butter the tile, which means you put the thin set on the stairs, keep it low, it's better, less is better than more, keep it moist. Do a pattern about this much. You don't want to do the whole stair and then this one starts to dry. Then you add more and it becomes a mess. So just go as you go. And buttering means you take the tile and you smear some of the grout on it, which is already on the step as well. By sticking them together, you'll find that even when you try to move this one, or maybe you decide, geez, I'd rather have that in another space, you could hardly remove it because it suctions it. If you don't do that, it can pop off really easily, especially the ones that you might kick at the bottom of the steps or the ones that you might step onto at the bottom. Definitely, you want to butter them. When you butter, the consistency of the grout should be like peanut butter, but not the thin organic type, the Jiffy peanut butter, creamy. With that, you want to avoid doing it smack on the edges. This way, when it places and you squish it down, you don't have a bunch of cement coming through. Otherwise, it just makes more of a mess anywhere. So try to avoid the edges, just put it on. It doesn't need to be perfect because you're just sandwiching it onto these pieces. Let's see, some of the things that you want to keep going. Know that you could always add water. When you mix the grout, start really thick. Don't put too much water when you start, or you'll end up with a mound of cement. So start with the water a little bit at the bottom and just keep adding cement, and just go for consistency. You don't have to measure like what cup to what cup. With this style that I had, I'll show at the bottom first. This is a real narrow staircase. They were supposed to start the stairs there and end up at the top, and they didn't. So therefore, instead of it looking like an error, I tried to make it look more like highlight. You can see here I've got the red tile. So I started with red. This is Mexico, so I had a lot of fun with the colors, rather than if this was in the United States or where I also live in Tahoe or San Francisco. I wouldn't have used these colors. Tahoe, I've got stones, rocks. You want to decorate for the space as well as yourself, of course. But see here, we went from red tile, and I went all the way up. I kind of had fun with it. And when you do this type of thing, whether or not it's the movement of color for stairs, or I also did the counters and did some staining, you can kind of tell. I put some blue and some tan that had a little bit of brown in it. You don't want it, you want it to be random. You want it to move through a certain point like this, how it moves through into becomes hardly anything. That's a common technique. Of course, it's artistic, so do what you want, but that's kind of a nice flow to step back. When I did these, I actually even started with the red just to kind of really get my pieces straight and have the flow straight. And then once I finished, I also painted the edge the same as the color. So it really made the finished look all the way up. This is it. Again, I'm stepping into the bathroom, but this is it before it's finished. It's not grouted, it's not painted. This one will be painted white on the edge. And then this, I just did a little bit of a slope again so it looked finished, but I didn't want to go up too high because this way, if someone stepped on this, they're not going to automatically pull this tile down or smudge this. And always have extra tiles because you could always use them later. Sometimes doing a variety helps because if there's ever a crack, and you can see here, I go actually from blue to black because this next section will have black there. And then I'll be tiling through here as well. Here, the grout is actually thinner. It's still, if it's thick, it's so much easier to use. See, this is like a thick peanut butter. You could stir it, you could add a little water if it starts thickening up. Cover it up if you're gonna go to lunch with plastic or something. And so you can see here, I'm out of breath. Here, this is still wet. When the grout is wet, sometimes you keep wiping and you can still see these streaks. Once they start to dry, the grout won't slide through to your tile as much. So what you want to do, you have 4 pieces of tile, right? Or how many sides? Is even if you're doing the top, like right here, you want to start at the top instead of just going choof. You want to start and just slide down because then it's always a clean piece of sponge that's hitting from top to bottom. That makes it real easy. Kind of like when you're caulking windows, if you wet your finger, you could also go through and smooth some out. You might have a little pocket and blend it. You can kind of see how that's smoothed. Depending on the thickness of the grout, but again, if it's a dry finger, see right there, it started to come up because my finger's a little bit dry. But here you could wipe with one side and you kind of turn it so it's always a clean spot. And then now this side's a little bit dirty. When it comes to this amount of tile space, tile cleansing, then it's good to use the other side and just see how that second wipe really cleaned it. Now some of that wipe, of course, is dirty. So if I use the top or the side, I can get this piece cleaner rather than wiping it with a dirty side that I already wiped. Again, when it's really gushy like this, you know, you knock it out Then see how I turned the sponge and I could knock it out. And again, if I tried really hard to do this, as soon as I did it, this thin or grout is too soft and oily and watery, so it's kind of messy. So you want to get most of it off, but then you could detail it later once the grout cleans. And see here, you could tell I just wiped with the dirty side, and here I actually made it more dirty, so you have to pay attention to that. See, now I just wiped with a cleaner side. I have two buckets of water. One is dirty that I keep using, and then when you want to totally finish in detail, when it's almost all done, and you're just squeezing that, then you use the cleaner water. It is time consuming. When you're doing a staircase, you want to start at the top of the staircase because it's easier to bring it down than try to bring it up. You can see what you're doing better than if you're trying to scoot up and maybe that's just my personal preference, but it just seems less clumsy. When you paint, when it dries, it becomes darker. But with the cement, it's darker, and when it dries, it becomes lighter. And I like this color because I wanted it to also blend more with the gray cement stairs. Again, it's just an artistic choice, but it's an easy choice also. If something chips, it's not as noticeable. And you can see I just used one side of the sponge and then just kind of keep turning it around. 1, 2, 3, rinse. 1, 2, 3, 4, rinse. Let's see. I've been using that round bucket. It's kind of a mess because I've used it multiple times and I'm too lazy to totally clean it out. You want to watch what you rinse down your sink, even your garden sink. You don't want to clog it up. Usually I just fill it with water at the end of the day after I've somewhat cleaned it with my hand in a plastic bag and kind of ripping out the excess. I usually will continue tiling till I use most of the cement, and then I fill it with water because again, I'm too lazy. The next day I could pour some into the sink. If you look into the water and it pours, to make sure that it's still clear. If it's dirty, you don't want to rinse it down your sink, or pretty soon you'll have a cement sink, a plumbing. Watch also if you think you're going to dump it into your plants or something, you might end up with a big cement patch. So, be mindful in where you dump it or how you clean it. It's all water soluble. Let's see, after you do this, you do want to put a sealer on it. Choose your sealer for if you want shine or not. If you have, mine already have a shine, but I'll do a light shine. But also if you ever do a tile job where it's more of a matted look, you want to do a matted finish on your sealer. If not, when you wipe, you'll see every wipe move and then you're like, oh my God, what do I do? And then you have to wipe it down like you're end dusting to get a sheen over everything. Otherwise you'll have these glossy smudges. So one thing that's great with tiling like this is if you end up with a lot of pieces that don't fit, just turn one around and break some more. So have a good time with it. Put on the music, and it seemed that it took me at first about an hour to do each step. But when I timed myself, I included the time of, setting up, cleaning up the whole bit. But it really was a lot more time consuming. It didn't seem like that when I was doing it. But when I looked at the clock, I was like, so make sure you have enough hours. And a lot of people think if you leave the cement and then put water on top, it won't harden. Well, it maybe won't harden for, a couple of hours, but overnight, a lot of times it turns into a big clump. Now, usually you could just put more cement on the top and the clump will be on the bottom, so you're not wasting a bucket, but it becomes very heavy to move at the end of 7 days. Anyway, have a good one. So one other couple of things while I'm doing this that I remembered. First of all, sometimes you'll see a line from here, even though this is going to dry lighter. So you just can smudge this for a blend, and also using your rag, also your thing to sponge to wipe it. So be a little bit, pay a little more attention there. But the reason why I say to make it thick like peanut butter is because you won't drip when you're applying it. It won't be going everywhere like when you paint and you're trying to erase the drip so it doesn't drop. The other thing is when you're doing stairs or walls, if it's really thick and if you butter the tile to stick it against the grout that's already placed on that wall, it won't slide everywhere, so you don't need spacers. I actually bought spacers here and didn't need them. Once I did a wall and it was a little on the thin side and it went all the way up Mosaic, and I couldn't wait to pull those blue little spacers out, and when I did, I noticed a 2-inch gap at the top, and I'm like, why is that there? Well, the darn tiles all started sliding because the thin set was thin, and then it shifted everything. So use it in the buttery texture, peanut butter thick, and then you don't need the spacers. It won't drip and it won't slide. Otherwise it's a big mess. And that's about it. You can see, and once again, when you use a sponge, think of, I'm gonna start, I don't know if you can see this, gonna start here and roll to the clean side. And then you flip, see the sponge, and I'm gonna start at the clean side and roll. Now we have 2 dirty sides. Now even doing the opposite, start at the clean side and roll. And it gets a much more cleaner, and then you rinse. So don't just think you're gonna do this and this because you're just smudging it around. And again, if you wait a little bit, you'll have to go back because you'll just keep wiping it out if you don't let it dry a little bit. So again, I've got one more side. Instead of going boom and out, which you put cement everywhere, I'm gonna start with the clean side. This way, as you wipe the tile, it's always with a clean sponge. One other thing I thought about is if the area is a little dirty, like here, I had a lot of dust on it from a lot of other construction going on and such, go ahead and just wipe it. I mean, you don't have to totally detail it either, and even down here. If there's a lot of dirt in there, it becomes part of your cement. But also it might end up being a protective barrier between the cement and the tile, where if somebody steps on it or hits it when they're dragging items up and down, it could chip there. The cement could chip out is what I mean, because the dust won't allow the next cement to sit. Also, if you do it with a wet sponge, it kind of easy, you could see it, and even moisture attracts moisture, so it's okay, you don't have to wait for it to dry. Of course, you don't want a big water puddle in there, but if it's a little bit damp, no problem. Also keep in mind all the little steps I'm telling you. It's like, hey, if you're gonna hit the ball and you have to think of, sit up straight, look at the ball, hit in this direction. It sounds like too much, but just know these are all tips. If your cement is a little too runny, it's gonna work. It's just gonna get really messy. If you don't do the outside corners first, it'll work, but it might be harder for you to find those pieces. If you hit the wrong part of these tiles in order to break them into pieces, you hit the top instead of the back, it'll be fine, but you might end up chipping some pieces. So it's not a big deal. Make it your own. It's not gonna fall apart. And again, even with the sponge, it's okay to use one side, but you'll just be smudging cement around, or should I say thin set or grout. So go ahead and, like I said, the swipe is hit on one side and roll, because if you just use one side and go like this, it's gonna take more time. You're gonna have to rinse more often with your pan. So it's take one side and then turn it, do the other side and turn it, roll the sponge. Go ahead, and it's so much faster than smudging it around or cleaning it every time. Just use one side, the next side to clean. Going the opposite, not always the same direction, can really help. So again, these are all tips to use, and even if you need a little blending, you could smudge it. So tips to use, but don't think, oh my God, this is too much, I can't do it on my own, there's too much to learn, because you learn as you go and see what works for you. And that's about it.